Are we still doing the remote at all?
We're just live streaming the meeting, but there's no communication from the public into the meetings. There's no remote option for like the commissioners and the public to come. That way-
Governor has not eased up on like he did before, so it could do that. Open Meetings Act does not allow that. So, the governor waived the Open Meetings Act so that we could Zoom.
Oh, okay,
Fired.
okay, so it's, so we can't do that,
No, we're
okay.
You still have the ability for people to submit comments directly from the packet, from the agenda. They can click to submit a comment, or they can call in or provide something in writing to us, but we just can't act during the meeting. Call in from home.
Okay. So we've got everybody here.
This is everybody we're going to have tonight.
Okay, then we can convene the January 5th, 2022 P and Z meeting at 7 o'clock. Pledge of allegiance.
Flag of the United States of America, and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Public participation. If you wish to address the commission, please fill out a public meeting appearance card and present it to the town administrator, preferably before the meeting begins, pursuant to section 551-007 of the Texas Government Code. Citizens wishing to address the commission or items listed as public hearings will be recognized when the public hearing is opened. For citizens wishing to speak on a non-public hearing item, they may either address the commission during the public participation portion of the meeting or when the item is considered by the Planning and Zoning Commission. Anyone wants to speak? There's no one to raise their hand. Discuss and consider approval of the December 1st, 2021 regular meeting minutes. Anybody
I didn't see
have any?
anything.
I move we approve the December 1st, 2021 regular meeting minutes as shown.
Second.
Favor? Unanimous. Item number 1, site plan amendment. Barrow, Bartonville Town Center. This is a public hearing to hear public comment and consider recommendations to town council regarding a site plan amendment for Bartonville Town Center being part of a tract of land described as Lot 1R-1, Block A, Dickman Plaza Edition, Town of Bartonville, Denton County, Texas. The property is generally described as a 7.32 acre tract of land generally located on the west side of FM 407, or commonly known as 2648 FM 407, Bartonville, Texas. The site plan amendment is requested to identify the location of a proposed new wall sign with illumination. We'll open public hearing at 7:03. Staff.
So this is an interesting item in that if it were up to me and I wasn't trying to get this through quickly for them, I probably would have recommended that we just look at an amendment to the ordinance regulating signs in the specific zoning district. If you drive through the Bartonville Town Center area right now, most, if not many, maybe most of the signs in the area are already illuminated signs. They've received permits and been installed throughout the years. And what they're requesting at the Barrel is no different than any of the signs that are there. It's actually less illumination than most of what is in place now. Unfortunately, in review of the permit application, it was determined that the town's ordinance does not allow for illuminated wall signs, even in the zoning district, without express approval during the site plan process. And obviously during the site plan process for Bartonville Town Center, they didn't identify the location of any future illuminated signs that they may want to have. So in order for them to move forward and comply with the ordinance for this sign, we directed them that they needed to go through a site plan amendment process. This would be the fastest way for us to give approval for that sign. In the future, stemming from this, we will be working on some sort of an ordinance update for something that we'll maybe workshop through with you to try to figure out how we can best address it, because it doesn't seem that there's any opposition to having illuminated signs in Bartonville Town Center within reason. And we're going to have some parameters in place to make sure there's not a very bright sign, which we already have some regulations specifically for lighted signs that were near residential areas and that sort of thing. But in order for them to get approval for this specific sign they've submitted, which is the third sign that they've submitted, it needs approval of a site plan amendment. So they've gone through the full application process. That's why you see the entire site plan in here from Dakeman on behalf of the Bureau. So if you have any questions, I might be able to answer it, but
So how many are already there that are actually illegal?
I'm not sure of the number, almost all of them.
There's some
I mean-
bright signs.
Yeah, when it was brought up to me that there were illuminated signs, I was like, oh, maybe something slipped through. And I drove through and they're almost all illuminated. And so what they're asking for is not anywhere near what is in place
Yeah, it's
currently.
pretty,
So They-
Unobtrusive.
the original sign they requested was not an illuminated sign. It was a blade sign, which is, it was like a projecting from the wall. I think they were thinking with the kind of walkable town center area that having a sign that projects from the building that people walking through would be able to see where their shop was located. But the town's ordinance does not allow for any sort of projecting sign. It has to be flush with the building. And so they went back and they submitted another sign. Then that wasn't approved by the building owner because of different reasons. And so now this is their third version of the sign that they're requesting. And even though it doesn't officially meet the town's ordinance, I don't think staff has any opposition to doing something that is kind of keeping in line with what is there already.
applicant isn't here. There's no, anyone to speak in favor? Anyone to speak opposed? Close the public hearing at 7:07. Anybody have questions?
I have a quick question, not specifically with this sign because it doesn't appear to be a sign that's any more obtrusive than what's there now. But considering what's there now, some of the signs are illuminated at night, even though the businesses are closed. My question is, can we, if we modify our town ordinance, can we encourage or require those businesses to turn those lights off at night? Because some of them are pretty bright at night and there's just no one there. They're just on.
That is it.
Yeah, we can look at that. I mean, there's sometimes signs are used for lighting and safety purposes without knowing anything about any of the particular signs you're talking about. We'd have to look into that issue to make sure that we don't encourage dark, dangerous areas at night. And that would have to take into account what other lighting is going on. That's really the first thought that comes to mind.
That center is extremely well lit, like a shopping, like a shopping center.
Doesn't need to be.
Yeah.
I mean, we need, but I think there's probably plenty of lighting there. We'll have to look.
Okay.
Yeah, I think there's plenty of light there that we require coming up with a different definition.
Yeah, we can look into that.
Some voices that. Absent the council, Mr. It's like. Loads or something.
So we need to look at that for the future. So
Do we
let's address this, anything? Councilman?
Sign the size of it. I think I move that the commission accepts the regulation as it stands. Is that
Proposed.
as it stand, as the proposed stand?
Second.
Mr. Chairman, excuse me, this is Eric Wilhite. He's
I
the planner.
apologize. I meant to do that at the beginning. when we got started.
So he's,
Just doing a graduate thesis, so I'm just saying.
I should have introduced in the beginning of the meeting. I'm sorry.
Yeah.
Eric works for Pacheco Coke. It's a consulting firm that does planning and engineering and all of that. So he's just doing some consulting on all of the various planning projects that are going on here.
Right, welcome.
Are there any projects going on?
Just a couple.
Zoning ordinance amendment, equestrian center. Public hearing to hear public comment and consider recommendations to the town council regarding proposed amendments to the town of Bartonville zoning ordinance related to the equestrian center regulations, including private and commercial stables and related matters. The proposed amendments may add, remove, or change definitions, amending zoning districts were permitted and/or by adding additional requirements and provisions necessary for the regulation of private and commercial stables within all of town's zoning districts. We'll open the public hearing at 7:11. Staff presentation.
I joined
We
this.
probably,
Sure. I was gonna say, I
Aries.
joined this process really late in the meeting process, but you do have your town attorney, Ed, as well as Mr. Otto, who were part of the group, and probably have feedback on what has transpired today. Ed, do you want to start?
sure. Okay. Gloria and Harry were on this committee along with two council members, Bridget and Jim Roberts. And so we met over a several months period of time. Part of it was interrupted because of COVID. That's why it kind of took longer than anyone thought it would. But we were tasked with looking at the ordinance provisions on the books and then seeing if there were any improvements available, any ideas of what we could do to improve things, get rid of some things that weren't very helpful or useful or even used. And that process took a long time. We looked at a bunch of different cities' provisions. We analyzed what the town's book said, and that really kind of summarizes the process. It went through a lot of considerations and thoughts with looking at what we currently have, what other cities have, what other cities don't have, what we don't have, and really was fairly thorough in going through a lot of different options and provisions. And so from that process, the packet includes a red line document. I'm going to talk about a couple of points there, but basically what that red line document shows you is not only some recommended changes that resulted from the committee's review of the ordinances, but also showed some places where the provisions were reviewed, but no changes were recommended. If it didn't have a red line change to it, then it was reviewed and no changes to it. That's what I'm trying to say. So that's really why that was included. So in preparation for today, what you've been handed out is an actual ordinance draft that incorporates the red line changes in what it would look like when it actually goes to vote eventually. with how the ordinances would be changed and how they wouldn't be changed. For example, you see on the first red line thing, definition, accessory buildings, residential, has a little bit of a change to it there at the end, in the last sentence. Whereas coming down that front page, on the red line page, there's several provisions that were left alone that don't have any red line changes. So those aren't going to be in the ordinance because they're being left alone. Okay. Now, one thing I will show is that as I was going through the process after our last committee meeting, I went through the ordinance creation process and realized that we had dealt with accessory building non-residential in the new subchapter 21A that you see kind of at the end of everything. And that deleting that actually created more problems because of all the different areas in the town code where non-residential accessory buildings are dealt with apart from equestrian centers. And so I didn't take that out. I didn't change that because it actually created more problems than we were solving. What we've done is we've addressed accessory buildings in the 21A new chapter that is a specific chapter that deals with equestrian centers and specific regulations applicable there, in addition to what we've done with the definitions and the different zoning provisions. Okay, and then going through when the city council met last month and decided to go ahead and move forward to public hearings for this item, there were a couple of things that were caught by some council members concerning the setback situation, which I've addressed, and also with a couple of wording changes like equestrian area in 21A2. So those things are, I think, cleaned up a little bit. And so really, even though they say, as they say, the devil's in the details, what I did from this red line document, as I said, is create an ordinance that incorporates it all in detailed form so that y'all can review it, think it through, talk about it, ask questions, that kind of thing. So with that kind of a background, did you have any questions? There's a lot of detail here, and so essentially the committee was concerned with some of the antiquities of the language in the ordinances, and so some of the language concerning, for example, what an equine animal is or what a equine animal activity means was pulled from state law, because state law deals with a lot of these definitions, and an equine animal is defined in state law as we have it defined here, which I think clears up some inconsistencies that previously existed in the ordinances already. So we added farm animal to define that a little more clearly. Again, that was largely based on state laws definitions. And so I think the idea here was to generally sort of unify and make consistent not only what we have on the books, but also address and provide some new language in the new chapter 21A. It's numbered that way because of the way the special provisions in that section of the zoning ordinance is numbered, so that it wouldn't be out of order and mess up the numbering on everything else, because there's so much cross-reference. We didn't want to have to, add more work to ourselves. So the numbering 21A seemed to fit the best. The 21A, beginning there on page 4 of the red line document, starts by adding different specific commercial equestrian facilities, parking requirements, accessory building requirements, fencing and screening requirements, operational regulations that really kind of helped address some things that in large part had already been addressed in a bunch of conditional use permits for a bunch of the equestrian centers in town already. So the committee looked at the best parts of those to include them.
This only affects the commercial equestrian center, not,
That's right,
so
not private.
like the 75-foot setback is only for commercial.
Right.
It's still 50 for,
other.
Uh,
Pilot.
but it's got a backyard horse.
Yeah, yeah. That's right.
Uh, Oh, the hours of operation. If I'm boarding my horse at an equestrian center in the summertime, I may want to be out there past 7 p.m. That seems a little bit. Well, daylight hours and from the heat of the day, you don't ride the horse when it's August. You don't ride the horse between 11 and 3 or 4 o'clock. And so a lot of people, especially if they're boarding their horse, would go out to ride if they can after 7 o'clock.
Some of the,
Yeah, that was another.
That there was a lot of previously what language was in those. Was the hours of operation something that had been previously addressed? In
Yeah.
this?
And that's why we have on the 21A4 operational, we have the lighting turning off at 10 p.m.
But on E, on 21A4E,
Now that
it does say hours of operation from 7 to 7. So I think that's what.
that just seems
so the
like that.
lights could still be on for 3 more hours.
Why would you leave the lights on 3 more hours? There's nobody there.
That's 10 o'clock.
Okay, so
That's like 9:30.
Yeah, to me, it needs to be a longer period,
okay,
Light hours.
especially if you're going to leave the lights on. That's, to me, would be the most obtrusive to neighbors than the actual riding.
Change during the summer. That's what it's there. It's on the right, so the dog does.
Specific time. It's just that it's less. It's very clear, right? So everybody knows and agrees what dusk means, or not, rather than having to agree what dusk means, or say, well, I just wasn't quite back in time, or something like that. That having a specific time makes it a little bit easier for everybody to enforce.
7 seems a little bit
Too early.
too early, because when I first moved here, before I moved out here,
Okay.
I was there later at night to ride because
sure. So what are y'all suggesting? 10 o'clock?
10 o'clock. If the lights are going to be on till 10.
Your
Anybody?
thoughts, or just
There's a sound clause here too, though. So are we going to allow sound to be also until 10? It's in the same,
Subsection D is in dog, is the sound limitations.
So what are the sound limitations? How is that?
Others, it's 10 o'clock, I believe. I'd have to go back and look, but it was more focusing on the equestrian function as opposed to being consistent with other uses. So whatever y'all think,
That should be a 10 as well.
y'all think.
The amplified sound.
For amplified sound.
Oh, well. Can't have a loudspeaker out there after 10 or after, I don't know, what time did we have on that?
It says 7 right there. 7 p.m.
right now it's 7.
This wasn't meant to be, or this wasn't discussed by the committee to match up with restaurants or businesses or any other places like that. It was for equestrian centers that are near residences. So,
Specific to like rodeos or something like that, that may be louder rounds and music. goal to have some provisions to
Differentiate
try
that.
to.
So,
So
but whatever, I mean, that's why it's here for discussion, to hear what y'all say.
How are the activities to go to 10? Isn't the sound part of an activity?
I think there may be a difference between an individual owner going out and riding their horse at 7 or 8 o'clock at night versus an event that has amplified sound.
But we're allowing the event to last till 10. It's on C, page 8C. All lighting in outdoor area or covered area used for animal activities must be turned off at 10. But you can have an activity all the way to 2 o'clock.
That you have to look at the definition for equine animal activity. It also includes riding. So it doesn't necessarily mean that an activity is
That's fine.
necessarily.
If they want to make it consistent, I'm okay with that.
Uh,
Why we wanted to get the
Well,
draft to you.
can we require them to get if they want to have like a show or clinic or something like that they have to get a permit for that? Or get approval from the town?
Well, we talked about that. We don't really have special event provisions in the ordinances. And
I mean, for people that are out there riding, even if they're taking lessons, when you're taking lessons, you don't typically have somebody out there with a loudspeaker telling you what to do. They're talking loud enough so you can hear them. But it's not.
I think it's
Tell
okay
me.
if you'd like for those to all match up and be the same time, but I think it's also acceptable if you would like to allow, lighting and hours of operation later than you want to allow amplified sound. I think it's okay to have 2 different times if that's what you'd like to do. But we're really just here to
what
get
I'm
feedback
hearing
from
is
all
a
of you.
consistency. I'm hearing them want to be consistent.
change the hour of operations for light. It's light. So lights, consistent with sound. It's at 7 o'clock. Light. It's amplified. So you can watch TV there at 7. You already got lights.
How construction activities at later.
I wouldn't have a problem with saying that amplified has to stop at 7.
That would be a
That sounds
great
reasonable. Stop the
compromise.
amplified sound at 7 and then the other activities go till 10 as well as the lighting till 10.
D alone and just changes E to 10 p.m.
That means if they're having a horse show or clinic, they need to be done by 7 o'clock.
It's all amplified by 7 o'clock.
Yeah.
Having a competition until 10 o'clock.
They cannot have the clinic. We don't allow them to have competitions.
Says here, the
Definition of
animal
equine.
activity means animal show, competition, performance.
We don't allow the amplified sound that sort of cuts off having the show. Show needs to quit at 7.
Conflict there.
They can still privately ride.
That falls under
Sure.
equine activities could still occur in the hours of operation, with the exception of not being able to amplify sound at that time.
That sort of does kill them having a horse show because that would require amplified sound, but that makes them have to be finished with the show by 7 o'clock.
Sort of things do typically shows or things such as that
The
activity.
kind of
go
shows they're gonna
as-
have around here, I would guess are not gonna go out that long.
Uh-huh.
I mean, if you're going to a big show, yeah, they may go to a block of one. I don't know that we have any facilities around here that would accommodate a big breed show, and that's what I'm thinking we'd find around here would be more likely to be small shows, small open shows, and like clinics. But we're just telling them that the clinic needs to be finished by 7 o'clock.
Don't forget also, this is.
That's
a
why I
public
was
hearing
thinking,
of- This is the
Was there
first of
some
two.
way that we could?
See how. See if they can-
That tonight is a public hearing, so you will open up to public comment at some point. And there may be public comment on that now and again on the 18th of the town council meeting. There's opportunity for people to provide comment that may be impacted by that or have better knowledge.
Thinking the most offensive part of it is the would be sound. Right. When Danny Mims used to put on shows, it would be dark and I could hear his loudspeakers in my house.
That violated the current sound ordinance.
I'm sure it was if I could hear it from my house.
Since that,
Now, if he has a show and he gets it over at 7 o'clock, then that's okay.
7 for the amplified sound, 7 p.m. Okay. These were, when they identify farm animals and such, they're looking, I know our intention is livestock, but are we trying to in any way address other things that are not specifically listed as a farm animal that are not
But the
bovines or equine or,
look at the definition of livestock.
okay,
We added one.
774.
On page 3 of the red line. I think that may answer the question.
where it says livestock means an animal raised for human consumption or a farm animal. So, okay.
Broader.
Yeah, I mean,
Sounded like your question.
yeah, it was.
Okay.
I mean, if somebody came in with a, get around it somehow, but at some place I remember it saying, it identified horses, cows, goats, and sheep and emus and all, and I'm thinking, there are people here that have camels out here, and or alpacas and whatever, which are cameeds or whatever you want to call them. And so I guess we could identify those if it ever was a situation where we're going to have a large bunch of them under farm animal. I guess that would cover that. Yes.
Like I said, the definition of farm animal came from the state law.
Oh, does it?
Yeah. So that was the source of that. It wasn't meant to overlook anything. It was, if you want to think of it as a starting point. I mean, if there's something we need to add there.
Let's finish Is there anyone here to speak for this ordinance? Okay. If it's, you're talking about, this is only for commercial properties, not private.
That's what I'm saying. It says, it's.
One of the things that the council mentioned last month was about that word areas in that very section 28.2B, and we've taken that out. Didn't make it by the time we got the packet put together, but the word areas is out of there, so it would read equestrian accessory buildings. So that takes care of that. The definition is in the list of definitions. And it's either a commercial equestrian facility or a private equestrian facility. Are the two kinds. Yeah, if it's existing, it'd be legally non-conforming. So there wouldn't have to be any changes automatically. Yeah. You would for the future, but the difficulty with changing zoning ordinances is that it's always prospective, and that whatever's existing when the change occurs becomes what they call legally non-conforming.
Anybody to speak opposed? Okay, then we'll close the public hearing at 7:37. Do we have any other questions for Harry or Ed? About it? Is there anything else you want to add?
Oh, I think Mr. Voss did a wonderful job on
Motion. Yeah,
That would be the way to phrase it.
motion to approve the Town of Bartonville ordinance provisions for equestrian centers and related matters.
Changes we just.
With the changes discussed this.
Second. Second. All in favor? Opposed? Your agenda items. It's coming up.
Still do not have any formal submissions of any additional subdivisions, that we are in discussion, I guess, on scheduling a DRC meeting for an upcoming 5-acre subdivision. some people to see something different than the 2 acre lots that you've been seeing.
You got my email. I can't be there next week.
Since we haven't finalized the date. So we do have an application that will come before you at your next meeting for a new and unlisted use classification for automated car wash. And so we're working on a staff report to add that to your land use table. It's currently not identified at all. And so we need to identify that use. And then you and the town council can discuss what zoning districts you would or would not allow that use in, and with it would be allowed by right or only by conditional use permit, and that sort of thing. So we're still putting together all the information on that, but that will be coming before you after next meeting.
Septic. I mean, yeah, without septic.
Sand traps, all that kind of stuff.
All that together for you to consider at next month's meeting.
Remember that we had discussed it in length and purposely left it out because we didn't want. it in. So
Identify the use at their request. We have to add it into the table, and then you can decide where you would.
stop me from asking.
All I really have. We have one minor change to some sign provisions, just the requirements for the public notice signs. Right now, the staff is placing the signs out at the properties when a zoning change is requested or a site plan amendment or something like that. But we're recommending an approval of an ordinance update that would require the applicant to be the one responsible for obtaining the sign from the town and placing it themselves. So we'll work on getting that
And we
updated.
need to put also on
But
the signs for.
So
for
so
placement at
several
village
of
center.
several of little cleanup items like that, we're going to try to piece together because they will require public hearings and amendments to zoning ordinance. So we'd like to do not a whole bunch of different public hearings where we're just piecemealing it together. So hopefully we can get some of that package together in the next couple of months. So that's really all I have to let you know about right now.
7:41. Ted?
Here's my card.
Work time.
So, did Gloria?
You said you're.
She had told us before, just that we're-
She was out of town.
Oh, she's out of town. Okay, okay. I just know this stuff. Wondered if that was something.
She's well. She's over the.
Okay.
Yeah.
Last time she was
Yeah.
getting up and around. moving around.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, she's not even on her cane now. So she's doing really good. She's not on her cane now.
Oh, well.
She doesn't have to use that all the time.
Seemed like a long time, didn't it?
Oh, they told her it'd be a year
Oh, wow.
before it was totally healed.
Mm.
She had pretty extensive
Well,
surgery
it's
on that
interesting
ankle.
because, you know,
I mean, there's pins in there and everything. So but they
No,
told her that it
but
would
like I
be a
said,
year.
So
That's
weird
the
the
way
way
state law
that
says
happened. Like she said.
so.
Hey,
do we
talk
have any
about
zebras around
lighting.
here that we need to be
That was
concerned about?
outside of the GOP headquarters in Denton. He was coming out of the meeting and there's no light out there. And she didn't see the curb. And when she stepped off
Really?
of it, then her ankle,
Okay.
she fell.
Isn't there some other thing where she tripped over a
Can I
dog
take
or a
this?
dog pulled her or something like
Now,
that?
that was a long time ago.
Oh.
You know, she had a broken leg before.
No, that's fine. No,
And then
if I can
this
take this.
happened.
Oh.
Yeah, that's fine. That's
Yeah,
a
the
good
broken
thought.
leg was about 3 years.
Because I never
I
found,
remember the dog stuff.
I mean,
Yeah.
when I looked at state law, I never found anything that
Seemed like she had some incident with a horse.
took that further than that.
Way back. you
But
know.
if
I
that's
think
something
she's a
that was
little
specific to an application that you
She'll
work,
admit that.
that's fine with
We had
me.
issues with popular pigs and stuff too, because they're not really big.
That's true. That's true.
So it's not for consumption.
Yeah. By most people. You know, it's a funny story. Hey, there's a funny story. When I was growing up, I played a lot of tennis. And one of my instructors was from Australia. And he worked in a pub down in Australia. And he
Because
said
kept saying red
they had a
line,
pet
red line.
pig
I was like, where's the
in the
red
park.
line?
And he said,
But that's
we
where
just fed him the
it was
dregs from the cages. And so, you know, there's a lot of stuff in the bottom and they just kept feeding him that. And he said that pig was a perpetual drunk. But he said, you know what? It's the best pig I ever ate.
He's
And
already,
then,
he's already being seasoned and cured.
yes.
While he's alive.
And so anyway, and so the girls in the class was just horrified.
We had people like that in high school or junior high. It's FHA.
Yeah,
And
yeah.
they be racing it.
Yeah.
Do not, they name everything. So
Oh,
don't
don't do
touch
that.
thing.
Yeah.
Listen, when that cat was over, he's older, they're gonna take it off. They're not gonna just raise it like you know. They're gonna raise that thing and put it through. That's not.
I heard him talking about the top metal pig way, way back. 10 years ago, when we were going through our ordinances and talking about looking.
Well,